This is going to be special for me, and honestly, I put this together pretty quickly, but this is something that I decided I wanted to do during COVID, and it was for us. Well, by a show of hands, how many of you hated the lockdown? Only half of you. By a show of hands, how many of you won't raise your hand no matter what I ask? There we go. There's always one. One of the things that happened to us during COVID is at our office, we usually book 20 appointments a week. So we're usually slammed back to back every day. And all of a sudden, things got shut down, and it was like I Am Legend with Will Smith. Maybe that's the wrong movie to reference because, he likes to slap people on stage, but it was like everything shut down. Coming from Dublin, where we live, to my office in Upper Arlington, every day I'd go in and I wouldn't pass a single car going either direction. It was insane. But what was different for us is all of a sudden we had all this time on our hands. Like, what are we going to do with this time? And the first thing I thought of when we started having a couple people come in for appointments was I wanted to talk about not money today or financial planning or retirement planning or estate planning. I wanted to talk to you about the things we do with that money or what we should do with that money. And I want to talk to you about time and the things that we don't think about on the other side of retirement planning. In other words, above and beyond just money and retirement planning. In fact, something that happened during COVID that Kim and I got a little productive because, again, we only had 3 appointments in 8 weeks is all. So many of you know who are in the room, I've seen some faces here that were actually there at our 16th anniversary party back in 2017. And it was just days, a week or so, I believe it was, after I lost my brother, who at the time, he was divorced for 2 years. He had 4 kids, 4 kids. One's autistic. He had full custody. Mom wasn't in the picture. And he was driving his motorcycle home one night really late. It was 89 degrees up in Cleveland, and he just fell asleep. And that was it. So being the financial advisor in the family, I was tasked with the job of going up and trying to put the pieces back together. Now, at the time, and this ties into what Barbara was just teaching you toward the end there, what I thought I was a rock star. I'm a financial advisor. I own a financial advisory firm. I've been doing this now for 21 years. I thought that by having my trust, will, powers of attorney, healthcare directive, testamentary trust, guardianship provisions, I thought I had everything I needed in order to take care of my family if something were to happen to me. It wasn't until after I had to deal with my brother's situation that I realized I'd hit about 20% of it, and that's it. So when I got back after, it was probably a couple weeks in Cleveland, I came back and I told Donna, I said, I promise you will never have to deal with what I had to deal with my brother Kyle. And so we built this thing we call a My Promise Kit. And the kit starts with Kim reaching out to our clients with a checklist on the left of here's the item, here's when we discussed it, here's when it's completed, and she goes down and gathers all the stuff from you. We buy a fireproof safe for you. We put all the files inside the safe, and what are the files? Well, the first files are what we call the red files, the emergency files, healthcare directive, powers of attorney, prescription drug list, supplements, things like that. And by the way, none of these things are personally identifiable. In other words, there's nothing in these files that would cause you to lose your identity or have your identity stolen. So we also had these ice keys made. They look like keys that go on a keychain, and all that information goes on a key that goes on your keychain so you can have it with you if you're traveling, you're out of state, or if you're in a car accident and first responders need to know, here, who are we talking about here? What kind of medications do we have? What can we give them? What can we not give them when in the back of the ambulance? So we put that ice key together. We have the red files, and then behind those files, we have the first thing, and honestly the most important thing in this whole kit, Kim would probably agree with me, password organizer. So when my brother passed, couldn't get in his laptop. Had no idea how to pay his bills. Didn't know where his life insurance was. Turns out he had just been laid off 2 weeks prior, had no life insurance for his kids. His phone was destroyed in the accident. And so, all his family pictures, videos were all on his iPhone, and no place that I went would break into it for me. They said, well, we have to know his iCloud password. I'm like, I don't know his iCloud password. His ex doesn't know it. His girlfriend doesn't know it. Nobody knows it. So the first and most important thing in there is the password organizer, which, as you all know, those passwords change. So over time, what we do is whenever we come in for an annual review or a semi-annual review meeting, we update any passwords that need to be changed. That way, something happens to you or your spouse or partner, whoever's in charge of your estate, whether that's a trustee, executor, and so on, they can deal with that kind of stuff without having to worry about the money part, which is the last thing you want to worry about when you've lost a loved one. So we've got password organizer, we've got your bank statements, your insurance policies go in there, your deed to your house, your titles to your car. Everything goes in here into this safe, and then we have what we call the My Promise Vault, which is a website. It's a third party, we've white labeled it, and it's encrypted, third party encrypted, and if something happens, let's just say we get a phone call and say, hey, something happened to Dad, I need your help, or something happened to my husband, I need your help. We flip the switch, and whoever your executor is or your trustee, they get full access to that. So today, we only show them a temporary login. We'll say, it'll say Adam and Donna, address, phone, email. That's all they can see. Because these days, especially certain generations, stereotypically don't want to share how much money they have with the next generation, so we keep it private, no problem. Some people share everything, that's fine, but it's by default, we want to keep it confidential. But if something happens to you, and we get that phone call, we flip that switch, and all of a sudden, whoever your executor or trustee is, they can help take care of that stuff on your behalf so you don't have to worry about it. Before my brother passed, it was something we used to always try and get our clients to do. We called it multi-generational planning, where we'd say, hey, let's get together with you and your son or you and your daughter, and let's talk about this. And no one wanted to do it. Well, this skips all that and makes it so you don't have to have the discussion, because again, it has to stay confidential. Jimmy Buffett said, wrinkles will only go where the smiles have been. So let's get some positive stuff here. Walt Disney said growing old is mandatory, but growing up is optional, right? We gotta keep having fun. So how many of you have been broke in this room? You raised your hand. Thank you. We've all been broke. Well, maybe not all of us, but we've all been broke. Everybody has a story, right? I'm going to tell you my story, or I'm going to start with my parents, actually. So my mom, descendant of Irish and German parents, if you wonder where the red hair comes from, it's her. And then wonderful father, alcoholic though, eventually became sober. But eventually at some point when I was, I believe, 13 or 14 years old, walking home from school, he loved Siesta Key, and he loved traveling there, but unfortunately couldn't drive anymore after 5 strokes, and he decided to take his own life. So we don't really know how long he would have lived to know, what does my mom's life expectancy look like, paternally speaking. She always likes to talk about how when she was a kid, she was only allowed to have one store-bought outfit per year, and that her mom made the rest of her clothes. So, I can't say that I was broke, per se, growing up by any stretch of the imagination, but I hear her story, and I hear my dad's story. If any of you don't know how to pronounce my last name, it's Koós, like kosher dill pickles. So that's how you'll remember it from now on. It's kosher dill pickles. My dad was born in Hungary. He escaped during the Soviet-Russian invasion of Hungary. Sounds a little familiar what's going on right now, doesn't it? His dad was an engineer, but he struggled to get a job in the U.S. because in Hungary they worked on the metric system, and he couldn't get a job here in the U.S., even though he had a good-paying job overseas. So my dad worked as a mechanic, working on cars, construction, to pay his way through school, and he finished his undergrad at Ohio State in 2 years, taking 24 credit hours per quarter, and then he went to optometry school for another 4, and he was done. And then I came into existence, I think, something like 2 years later, something like that. So that's my parents' story. So we know we've all been broke, but like I said, not all of us. I can't say that I've been broke. I didn't grow up broke. I like to say that I grew up resilient and then somewhat afraid, to be honest. I grew up in a little town called Oberlin, Ohio. Anybody ever heard of Oberlin? Yeah? So Oberlin's west of Cleveland. I always say that Oberlin is to Cleveland as Delaware is to Columbus. It's the same kind of distance. But it's a predominantly black area. All the people in town are either professors or they work for the college. And I got made fun of. Now, granted, I only had one white friend growing up, but I used to get picked on a lot. They called me the rich white kid. Now, I never felt rich at all. In fact, we went to Siesta Key every year. I mentioned my grandpa used to like to go to Siesta Key every year. I like to go to Siesta Key every year, and we'd always stay in their trailer, which was like a mile off the beach. It was free, and we drove down and back. And everybody but me, loved the drive. But to this day, I still love to drive. So we'd visit Grandma and Grandpa down in Siesta Key every spring break. And then occasionally we'd go on these free trips, which are awesome, paid for by Bosch& Lomb, Rooney Optical, because my dad was an optometrist. So they'd have these conferences, and we'd go to Salt Fork or Oglebay. I was just talking to Donna the other day about going to Oglebay and remember like the kind of cabin feel, lodge feel. So we did that. But we were never rich. You know what I mean? We were above middle class, but compared to the people I hung out with, compared to my friends, I was rich. And to this day, I still struggle with this idea of becoming successful or being successful, because I always kind of have this idea that, if people view me that way, that it's a bad thing. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. But as I grew, every day growing up, or I'll say every week, almost every day, I would come back from school, either on my bike or walking, and I would stop at my dad's office. And I would sit there and I'd see his staff, and how much they loved him and how much he enjoyed working with them. I'd see his patients and how much they loved him, and I thought, I want that someday. And I always wanted to be like my dad. I always wanted to be a doctor. And but as I left home, 17 years of age for Ohio State University, I was always terrified that if I don't be a doctor like my dad, or if I don't become a doctor like my dad, that was terrible grammar, that this is as good as it gets. In other words, that Rooney Optical vacations once a year, going to Siesta Key with Grandma and Grandpa, it was just going to be less than that for the rest of my life. So what drove me was I always try to explain that, I didn't grow up super, super poor, but I think that there's a lot of people that can relate to the idea that you grow up with a certain lifestyle as a kid, and you at least want to retain that lifestyle and want to provide for your family in the same way that you were provided for. What I learned very early on is to not only fail, but as one of my mentors taught me, I learned to fail fast. Fail fast, get it over with, move on, what's next, right? And another thing I learned from another mentor, he's also an author like Barbara. His name's Nick Murray. He's known as the financial advisor to financial advisors. I called him up one time and I said, I want to help this couple could come in our office. I said, I want to help them so bad. They're getting taken to the cleaners by their current advisor. The guy's overcharging them. He's not doing the right thing, and I can't convince them to work with me. And he says, Adam, I've never met somebody who likes pain more than you. He's like, why do you keep trying to get people to work with you who don't want your help? And I just kind of sat there like, it's a good point. So you learn these lessons as you go. But I wanted to be the best at what I did. Well, what's that mean? And to speak to Barbara's point about solutions, being the best in our industry means relentless thirst for knowledge, continued education, continually learn to be better at what you do. It means providing unbiased, authentic, fiduciary-driven advice. It means being available, maybe too available sometimes, at the drop of a hat whenever somebody needs you, because that's what you would want. Because when you care about someone, and I know we have some clients in the room, some not, but when I say we care about you, Gina, Kim, and I, we care about you. And it's like when I say you're an extended member of our family, that's what you are to us. I see some head shaking, thank you. Because the solutions are easy. And you might, what I love, one of the things I love about what I do is that for Kim and I, the solutions we provide once we have the information we need from you are not that hard for us, because it's what we do all day. It'd be like me coming to your office to try and figure out whatever it is you do and try to figure it out on my own. I would have no clue, none. So, but that's what you do. You know that. That's what you do all day, every day. Well, this is what we do all day. So the solutions we provide are perceived as difficult, but they're not to us. However, I like to compare it to getting a black belt in martial arts. So when I got a black belt in Taekwondo, your instructor teaches you pretty early on. It's the beginning, not the end. You don't go through all this training and learning the basics to get a black belt and then quit. That's when you start. That's when your challenges really begin. It's the same thing with how many by show of hands have ever run a 5K, 10K, half marathon? Okay, handful of people. So the solutions are kind of like training for the marathon, buying the shoes, eating the right food, prepping for race day. But once you get to that point where you're ready to actually start retirement planning, that's the beginning. And that 26.2, is that right? I'm gonna embarrass myself. That 26.2 mile race is like 65 to 95. And it's not a flat, level ground the whole way, is it? There's rain, wind in your face, there's hills. That's the market. And anybody who sits at the beginning of the finish line and thinks the market's gonna push them to the end of the finish line is, well, mistaken, right? So, as Yoda said, we all, much to learn, we have, I messed it up already. Much to learn, you still have. So we all have to learn more. We all have to think of money in a different way. And for the first time ever, I looked up this quote because a friend of mine who's younger than me said this to me back in 2002, and it just always stuck with me. And so I was convinced he stole it from someone, and I can't find it anywhere. And if it's not on Google, it doesn't exist. So it must be his quote. So Colin, my good friend Colin Egbert, he said, money is not the root of all evil. Money is a unit of choice. And the more units you have, the more choices you have. Is that not true? Yeah. It's just paper, right? So what describes retirement? I'm going to pull Barbara here, and I want to get some audience participation. When you think of retirement, what does that mean to you? What words describe retirement? Enjoy. Yeah, that's good. Anybody else? Freedom. Great. More? Security. Travel. It's up there. A bunch of retirees were surveyed, and these were the top, from left to right, top to bottom, these were the top most responded words that people use to describe retirement. And you could probably consider at least a few of those words to attribute to retirement yourself, right? Well, here are the things we don't know. And I think this is the most important thing is we all know what we know, and I think sometimes we know what we don't know, but there's often times when we don't know what we don't know, right? So for instance, when you're employed, when you're working, you spend on average 2.8 hours watching TV per day. But when you retire, it goes up to 4.5. I hear laughter. Your reading is doubled. I guess that's not a bad thing, right? Socializing, maybe because you have more time, goes up from 0.5, call it 30 minutes to 40, 45 minutes a day. Relaxing kind of stays the same. That's kind of sad to see. I'd like to see more relaxing. And then just other leisure activities. This is hours of day when you're awake, so non-work time, that people spend with other people. So if you're working, and if you're still in your working years, then on average, you're spending 5.3 hours alone. But if you're retired, that looks more like 10 hours. Obviously, if you no longer have a spouse, then that would be 0, but 7 hours with a spouse if you're working. 2 hours if you're retired, spending time with family with no regard to your spouse. Maybe 50 minutes per day with friends, non-relatives that are not friends. I don't know why you hang out with not friends. So full-time workers, here's how their time is spent. Top weekday activities, 461 hours sleeping, 447 hours working, 97 hours watching TV. Retirees, we sleep a little bit more, don't blame you. Why not, right? But television and movies, 223 hours. And one of the things I want to talk about today is that I think COVID taught us a lot, first of all. And I think that relationships are so much more important now than they ever were before COVID. I think you'd probably agree with me. But we need to get this television time down and start spending more time with other people, in particular family, our loved ones and our friends. This is time spent by age. So age is at the bottom, 15 years of age, 40, 60, 80. So you can see here, time spent with your partner goes up obviously because you get married probably. You spend time with them. It goes up when you retire and then comes down. Obviously, in some cases, people lose a spouse. Time spent with family. Look at this. And I'll get to that in a second. I got more details here on time spent with family there. But look at this up top. Time spent alone. It's not healthy. It's not good for us, is it? When people come to our office, they usually know what they're going to do with the first 10 years after retirement, but they don't know what they're going to do with the next 10. People don't think about it. But there's going to be a next 10. 93% of the time you have spent with your kids was over with by the time they turned 18. So when they were 18, 93% of the time is gone. You've got 7 left. Now, if they're older than 18, it's less than 7. I'm going to prove it to you. We'll get to that in a second. First, here's a 90-year life in years. Each box is a year. Puts things into perspective, doesn't it? I did my own. That's what I got left. This is human life, a 90-year human life in months. Count them out. How much have you spent? What do you have left? I've got 46 winters left. I'll vote in 12 more elections, and that's it. Maybe that's a good thing. If you are 30 years of age, then the average age of your parents, so this is, you talk to your kids about this, the average age of your parents is 57. That's average. Which means 24% of their lives are left to spend with your parents. That's it. That's just time. Not actual time spent with them, but the amount of length of time remaining. Because here's what I mean by that. This isn't the full story. Average life expectancy, US, 79 years of age, Germany, 81, Japan, 84, 75. Down in Brazil, I don't know what they're doing down there. But here's what life looks like if you're 65 years old right now. Is this hard to see? These dots here is if you spent 14 days per year with your kids. And usually that's about right. Most people think 14 days, that doesn't seem like a lot. Now some of you, maybe you're involved in the grandkids' life a lot more, maybe you're watching them, that's different, right? At least for now it's different. So anyway, point being, there's 7 holidays that most families spend together. And then I'm throwing in another 7 for birthdays, just time together, visits. But when you look at that time, if you look at all these dots at 14 days spent per year, and you put them all together with what's left in a 65-year-old's life, between 65 when they pass away, based on life expectancy, this is all the time that's left right here, based on the actual time you spend with the kids, or for me, my parents. So how much do we really have time? How much time do we really have left? The average life expectancy, like I said, 79 years of age in the U.S. For males, it's 76. For females, it's 81. Our average client is 60. So if we bet average, then that means we live for another 19 Super Bowls, 8 to 9 Olympic Games, and then 5 more elections. As for what's really important in our life, if we see our kids, here it is, for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, Mother's Day, Memorial Day, Father's Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and another 7 birthdays and other visits, then we have roughly 133 visits left with our kids. And that's assuming we're 60, we take good care of ourselves, we remain healthy for the next 2 decades, and we make it to life expectancy. In other words, my grandfather, who took his own life, this didn't happen for him. My other grandfather died of a heart attack at 54 years of age. Didn't happen for him. Not all of us are healthy, so we don't know how much time we have left. I told you the story about my brother earlier. We don't know how much time we have left. So this isn't, as I said, money's a unit of choice. The more units you have, the more choices you have. But we want to spend time with the people that we care about most. So the point here is not to be depressed about these numbers. It's to understand the numbers, so we spend less time watching TV, less time kind of moping around, doing things and saying, I'll get around to it, I'll spend time with them later, and spend more time with the people that we love while we're still around. I already mentioned how I used to go to my dad's office all the time, right? When I was a kid. That's gone. It's over with. It was awesome times. I cherish those days, but they're gone. How many father-son trips? How many glasses of whiskey do we have left? How many boat stereo installs? I helped him install a boat stereo in his pontoon boat at Buckeye Lake where they retired. How many birthdays do I have left with him? How many Thanksgivings, Christmas days, Father's days, Mother's days, Buckeye games, Brown games, air shows? We love going to the air show. My dad's 70. I've got 9 left. 9 air shows, right? Now what about my time? Some of you were asking earlier, how old's Karsten now? Karsten's 12 and a half. Karsten's going to be driving in 4 years. Look out. Camden's 9. How many more books am I going to get to read to them before they don't care about books anymore? How many cuddles? Karsten, he won't hold my hand anymore. It's too cool. So he'll hold my hand when no one else is around and there's no friends around, but that's it. How many one-on-one car rides do I have to golf lessons, tennis, taekwondo practice? And again, because I take my boys with my dad to the air shows, how many birthdays, Thanksgivings, and so on are left with my kids before I'm gone? So my question to you, and the whole point of this presentation, is how much time do you have left? And what are you going to spend with it? And back before COVID, I used to do a lot of presentations. I love doing this. I love teaching. I love getting up here and finding statistics, and whether it's nerdy or not. But I always end with the same Chinese proverb, and it goes like this: if you know, but you don't act, then you don't know. So all I'm suggesting is, now you know. So thank you for your time.